Hi, welcome to everyone who's here at our college run through, our college education video. Kelly is an associate chair of the Equestrian Studies at Savannah College of Arts and Design. She is a very versatile individual because she's also a professor of equestrian studies at SCAD, University of Findlay and Lake Erie College, and has coached equitation, jumpers, dressage, and eventing. She was a founding coach of the intercollegiate eventing team at Findlay and coached the intercollegiate dressage teams to nationals, IDA to nationals. Her students have qualified in U25 jumpers and U25 eventing. I guess that means under. Her role at the university, in her role at the university, she communicated with prospective students and parents, planned recruiting events, resulting in expanded enrollment in the equine studies by 140% in 5 years. That's huge. She has guided students through the arduous process of deciding on the most appropriate program for them to reach their goals in the equestrian studies. She has helped them to find internships and career opportunities. Kelly is also the founder, head trainer at Ruin Stone Farm LLC, where she breeds and trains horses for dressage, eventing, and jumping. She focuses on classic training following a method system with horses developing and welfare at the forefront. Horses development and welfare at the forefront. She has competed to I1 and has earned her bronze and silver medals. She is a USDF L program graduate and is a USEA instructor, has an USEA instructor certification. She has competed in eventing at the CCI 2-star events, winning many accolades. Kelly also is a certified independent saddle fitter with extensive experience and training in both equine and rider biomechanics. Her mini Nubian dairy goats and honeybees business provides provides goat milk and honey products used to produce cheese, butter, lotions, soap, candles, and honey. So with that kind of shaky introduction, I would like to turn it over to Kelly. Kelly, it's yours.
All right, thank you. I'm glad you could be here tonight. And like Molly said, if you do have questions, just jump in. And if you want, anything to go a different direction, I can easily punt. So that's all good too. All right. So riding in college, there are a lot of different options. You can try out for a team. So I'm going to go through some of these. Sorry, now I'm having technical difficulties. You can try out for one of the riding teams at many of the colleges now have this. And depending on if it's eventing, dressage, or hunter equitation or Western, there are many colleges with intercollegiate teams, and then there are also a handful of colleges with NCEA, which if you ride NCEA, it's hunter equitation, Western, and reining. And there are more scholarship opportunities, but it's also much more competitive to get those spots at those schools. So I'm just going to hop on a couple of these links just so you see what it looks like, and then you'll also have, hopefully I can share this presentation and you'll have access to it. But intercollegiate eventing program, and every part of the country has IEA teams. So anywhere you want to go, larger schools, smaller schools, kind of run the gamut. So there are a lot to choose from with the eventers. And now I'm in trouble. Sorry. Okay. And IDA, same way. IDA, the Intercollegiate Dressage Association, there are schools in all parts of the country that have IDA teams that compete in their region and then at nationals. And then Intercollegiate Horse Show Association, again, that's hunter equitation and Western, depending on the school. I worked predominantly, my experience was at Savannah College of Art and Design, which is SCAD in Savannah, Georgia. And we had just a hunter equitation IHSA team. We did offer riding classes in dressage and eventing, but predominantly the focus was on hunter equitation, and had a lot of students that competed in Wellington on the winter circuit doing jumpers and hunters. NCEA, and I'm afraid every time I do this, I'm going to lose my presentation, so bear with me. So the NCEA schools, again, those are the schools that offer, there's more oversight, I think, with the NCEA, and it's definitely more competitive to make those teams. Some of the schools have NCEA, and then they also have IHSA, I think, to make it more accessible to more riders. But there's that list. And I'm going to get lost every time I do that. I'm so sorry. Super lost. Okay.
Looks like you may not be able to link outside the
I think I
presentation. Oh,
can't
there you
link
go.
without getting
There you
lost. So this is the next slide. So the Intercollegiate Eventing Association requires the college or university to be fully accredited. And I don't know if it was always strange to me that some schools aren't fully accredited, but that is actually a thing. So you have to make sure when you're making choices and when you're looking at different programs, sometimes the college can be accredited, but the major is not. So you want to be careful. It just makes a difference because then they have to, if they go through the accreditation process, there are checks and balances, and that's really important. So you want to make sure that not just the college, but the major is accredited. All equestrian majors can be accredited, so that if they say, oh, well, it's equestrian and they don't accredit that, that's absolutely not true. So just make sure that that's a question you ask and something you look into just to keep the quality there. So anyway, the eventing IEA requires them to be accredited, which actually is kind of unique to IEA. So that's pretty cool. Most colleges provide for the intercollegiate teams. They provide the horses and you compete on the horses. Eventing can be a little bit different. Like they can use their own horses as well. But dressage and IHSA, they're college horses only. So IDA dressage, the mission of IDA is to introduce students to the equestrian discipline of dressage and to foster continued development. IDA does not require all schools to have accredited equestrian studies programs. So something to ask about. Most of them, IDA has a huge presence in the country. So there are lots of schools to choose from. I'm not going to click on the link, but you can later. And IDA is done at levels. So you can be a very inexperienced rider and still have a place on the team. That's the same with IHSA, which is the Intercollegiate Horse Show Association. you can be a walk trot rider and have a place on the team. So it's not just for students that are really strong in their skills. The levels do go up, but there's a place for everybody. So don't think that just because it's a team and you might have to try out that you won't make it, because there's different, like, I know that the students would always get really worried watching other people try out because they're like, well, they ride so well, but different levels, different requirements. So don't let that discourage you. IHSA is English, hunt, seat, equitation, and Western. And then again, I'm afraid to click on anything. I might go back at the end if anybody wants to see any of it. IHSA was like the first intercollegiate association in the country. So Bob Cascione, who unfortunately passed away this winter, he spearheaded the IHSA and he stuck with it his entire life. He wanted there to be a place for kids that didn't have the opportunity to ride. He wanted there to be a way for them to ride. And he did it in colleges and kind of came up with the idea that the schools would own the horses and that then they would go to other schools and compete on that school's horses. So that's the general gist of IHSA. And Bob had a huge hand in that, and he is missed. NCEA, National Collegiate Equestrian Association. So there's jumping seat, over fences, jumping seat flat, Western horsemanship, and Western reining. So again, NCEA is more competitive. They don't have the levels like the intercollegiate teams do. So it's a little tougher to get those spots. But they do offer scholarships. And some schools, SCAD offered very few scholarships, but there were like 2 equestrian scholarships for students. So, and that was a full ride. So even for IHSA, some schools, especially some of the more successful schools, do offer riding scholarships. So it's something to ask about. So the other way to ride in school or be around horses is to major in some kind of equestrian studies, equestrian science, pre-vet, animal science. There are a lot of different options. Most colleges with equestrian majors, they have riding classes built into the major. So you're required to take riding classes, which is just kind of great. But and then there are additional opportunities to ride. Like if students are independent enough in their skills, they can free ride on a weekend or help rehab horses, or, you know, there are ways to get extra rides in too. Some schools do, like, their faculty teach private lessons to students also. So there are lots of different options within the school using the school's horses, so you don't have the expense of bringing a horse to school. And a lot of them do allow students to board their horses at the school facility, which makes it kind of convenient, because if you're already doing classes there, then your horse is there. So that's any questions so far? Okay, I'm going to go on. So I did kind of a questions to ask, because there are things that I think it's easy to assume, because you expect at the collegiate level for things to be done like at the top of industry standards and expectations. And my experiences and seeing a lot of different schools and traveling to competitions and everything is that it's not always quite what I expected. So I'm going to give you a bunch of questions to ask if you're touring schools, if you're, you know, looking into it, emailing, or talking to people just on the phone, things you might want to think about. So questions to ask about teams. I already said some of them have riding scholarships. Ask, because, you know, even if you're a walk trot rider, but they really need a strong walk trot rider and your skills, that depends on like the amount of show time you have. So if you're somebody that really hasn't shown a ton, but you've ridden a lot, they really like those, those students, because you're strong, but you don't have all the show experience, because the show experience is what dictates the levels. Ask, are there tryouts? And if there are tryouts, like what's the percentage of students that make the team? How many are on the team? Again, to go back to SCAD, because that was my home. We had like 75 on the team. So it was a huge team, really, really deep. A lot of them they don't have the financial backing to afford to have that many kids on the team. So that's another thing to ask is, how many and what kind of support they have. SCAD, if they made the team, they paid for nothing. So travel was all paid for. If they didn't have riding attire, that was paid for. If they didn't have like the right riding attire, it's kind of been crazy. But is there an appropriate BMI expectation? So some people will, some schools do require riders to be within, usually the rule of thumb is 15 to 20% of the weight of the horse. And some schools will, want the rider to be within that. A lot of, like, at SCAD, we had horses that were, if somebody was a little bit heavier build, we had bigger horses. So it worked out. What are the credentials of the coaches? So what have they done? Like, why are they there? And I think that becomes really important. You're going to be spending a lot of time, and kind of their philosophies are going to be what you have to deal with, and you have to learn from them. So asking that and finding out what their background is, what their philosophy of horse care, of riding, everything, that it makes a difference that you have a good fit there. Ask how often the team practices. Some practice very sporadically. Some it's very serious and it's every day of the week. So ask that question too. Are there trainers for physical fitness? So like yoga, weight training, running, do they have access to the trainers that the other sports have access to? Because if you get injured, it is nice to have, most colleges and universities have a staff of physical trainers. So it's nice to have access to that in the equestrian sports as well. General horse welfare questions and rider safety. So this seems like, well, it might not be my problem kind of things, but it does kind of speak to the philosophy and where you sit with it. If horse care and horse welfare is super important to you, make sure that you ask questions to know that they're going to be taking care of the horses the way that you would expect them to be cared for. Ask how the school horses live. Like, are they in stalls? Do they get turned out? Are the stalls cleaned daily? Are they cleaned a couple times a day if they're in them all the time? Oops, sorry. I have to move my bar over. Do they get turned out? What happens to the horses in summer? So this is kind of interesting because some schools will actually lease out their herd to summer camps. And I think for the most part, that works pretty well because the horses then maintain a certain condition. As long as the care at the camp is consistent with what you want, which it ends up being a good financial decision for some schools. If they turn them out on pasture, because I know some schools will also just turn them out on pasture, pull their shoes and like let them be. So that's a good question because I wasn't okay with that. I was not scared, but do they have a ferry schedule? Are they provided shelter? What are they fed? How often? So another question to ask is how many horses in the herd? And then kind of along with that, where did I put it? How many times a day are the school horses ridden? So some sometimes the horses will go like in class and then they'll go in team on the same day. Or sometimes they'll go in class 2 times and they'll also go in team the same day. They're pretty tired by the end of the day. And a lot of the horses, most all the horses are donated. So a lot of times those horses are donated because they're a little older or they have some sort of soundness issue that prevents them from being super competitive anymore. So people will donate them. So kind of as a rule, it's good to know how many times they're going and just make sure that that's a number you're okay with. Again, at SCAD, they only went once a day. So they were either in team or they were not, or they were in a class. If they did go twice a day, it was a really light ride the second time. So, and sometimes it's good for them, if they're younger and they're super, like they have a lot of energy and they aren't getting a ton of turnout. Sometimes it's actually not bad for them to get out and their feet a couple times a day. So that just depends. A lot of them are older, just the nature of the beast. But then the other question that goes along with that is like, what happens to the horses when they no longer can be serviceably sound for the program? So find out where they go. What's the plan after they're done? I think the schools that are really meticulous about the care of their horses have a plan for those horses for the rest of their life. So not necessarily that they keep them there, but that a lot of times graduates, alumni will like put themselves on a list for their favorite horse, and then they can adopt that horse out. I actually have a horse now here that was a SCAD horse, and he wasn't sound enough for the program anymore. So he came home to be a trail horse, and he ended up with some turnout and a lot of trail riding, being sound. So it's cool. How many staff members care for the herd? Then I guess along with that is, do students expected to do the work and are expected to do the work? Horses are cared for daily. I do think it's great when students are required to do barn work, but kind of thinking through what the plan is when they're not there. And then the two kind of tough questions, but I feel it's really important to mention, because my experiences with a lot of different teams is that there were definitely coaches that thought it was okay to tranquilize the horses and then put a rider up. So it's a question to ask, like, if you're okay with that, then it was really unfair both to the horse and to the rider. So it's something to, in full disclosure, something I would definitely ask. Both of my daughters are 16 and 18, and that is a question I would ask of any program. So faculty and staff, what is the documented industry success? Like, make sure, they can walk the walk and talk the talk. So make sure they've done it. Is the overall climate supportive or strictly competitive? And some people want that really competitive climate, and some people want more like, just a lot of support and help, and just, it's not about winning, it's about learning and being good to your horses and all that stuff. So, and there are definitely schools that combine the two quite nicely. And then there's some schools that kind of sway one way or the other. Do your instructors and faculty have advanced degrees? So again, that goes back to accreditation. In order for them to be accredited programs, they have to have a certain percentage of classes taught by people with advanced degrees. Are faculty full-time or adjunct? Adjunct faculty is great because it adds diversity, but if all the faculty are adjunct, that would be a question, that would be a concern, just because of the continuity and everything. And then the other question is, do all instructors abide by safe sport? So they should, but it's a question to ask. So just to make sure that they're current with what's going on in the competitive world. Academics are all majors at the college. Again, I know the accreditation thing, I'm like beating a dead horse, but are there majors in equestrian studies, animal science, pre-vet? Like, what's the option? What is the graduation rate within 4 years for the program or major? Also, that they hold on to their students. So how many, if they have 50 in their freshman class, how many of those 50 students are going to graduate within 4 years? If there's a lot of turnover, if there are a lot of students that transfer, that's an indicator of something. So how rigorous is the classwork? Our classes were 2.5 hours. Our lectures were 2.5 hours long. It was definitely rigorous for the professors, but it was just, it was a lot, but it was also, if you're interested in horses, then it's just fun. So what's the student faculty ratio? And are the writing classes for credit? Most in the major would be, but like if it's animal science or something like that, then it's not going to have it included in the major. Financial, FAFSA, everyone, fills out the fact that schools kind of require it now. Unfortunately, I went down a rabbit hole about a month ago and realized that the state of Illinois does not have the grants and scholarships that, like, say the state of Vermont does. But I guess I chose wrong when I moved back home. State grants, scholarships, work study. There are a lot of no loan colleges or low loan colleges. So it's based on what you can afford to pay, and you don't really take a loan out past that. And there are a lot of no loan colleges and low loan colleges that have writing programs. So the other question about like financial, which this could probably go back a slide or two, is ask about the college or university's endowment. So it's a really strong indicator of their ability to support programs and students. If their endowment is not very large, it tends to show. So, or there are other things, like we went and did a college tour at a school in Florida over Christmas, and it was just kind of like, it was just really sparse. So like it wasn't landscaped, it wasn't whatever. And then I dug a little deeper, and since the hurricanes have ramped up so much, their insurance has, like, I don't know, it was crazy the amount of insurance that they were paying every year, and they were in the hole. So it does show, and usually the horses are the first place that they pull back. So it's an important thing to think about. All right, what will I or my child do with an equestrian degree? So this was always my favorite question from parents. So, and I listed a bunch of career options, not all of them, but just I have it. I have several students doing many of these things. Surprisingly enough, I think I have 4 equestrian studies majors that are now attorneys. And it's not that surprising, but it is kind of a strange path to get there. One of them, she just sent me a cover letter for a job she's applying for and asked me to edit it because that was, she knows me. So I was like happily editing away for her. I've had students who wrote for the Chronicle of the Horse. I have quite a few that are professional writers, architects, just trainers, equine photographers, several equine photographers, and they're all doing really well, which is nice. Obviously veterinarians, and I have several that are vets or very nearly vets that came out of equestrian studies programs. not pre-vet programs. So if that's something you're interested in, there are different ways to get there. And then some specifics, an egg employment agency in Wisconsin for the dairy industry, like using that whole egg side of things. Founder and owner of Exquisite Elements of Style, based in Wellington. And then, it kind of just depends. I had one student who repeatedly emailed. We went on a farm visit to Darley in Lexington, which is one of the large thoroughbred farms. And after we went, she would send an email every time one of the Darley horses did well, because she wanted to be in the thoroughbred industry. And she went when she was a freshman. Every time one of those Darley horses did well in a race, she would shoot an email to the breeding manager, say, hey, congrats, so nice to see, whatever the horse was, just a quick email. She did that for 4 years. I was like, Nicole, this might be over the top. But she did an internship for them, and the breeding manager created a job for her when she graduated. So it's a good way to make yourself, endear yourself to somebody. But that follow through and kind of figuring out what you want to do and just going for it is really important. Equine artist, she's fantastic. But anyway, they're also kind of far flung. Like the girl in the picture she's a professional in South Africa, and she does jumpers, and then she also has started riding racehorses, which terrifies me, the mother in me, but she's loving it. So that's cool. And I think that's the last slide. So, overall, like when I went to college, apparently there were a few programs, but I sure didn't know about them, except for Sweetbriar. It was like the only one I knew about. So there's a ton of options. The other thing I didn't do a slide about, because I thought it was just easier to talk about, is taking your own horse to school, like finding a place that's kind of horse central and taking your own horse with you. There are a lot of, just doing college and then taking your horse on the side. My mom's famous quote when I was in high school was, over her dead body would I take a horse to school? So I took 2. But, and I didn't go to an equestrian program. I didn't go through an equestrian program, but, I think University of, there are places, I have a friend that went to University of Delaware, good school, but she might have chosen it because it was really close to the whole hub of eventing on the East Coast. University of South Carolina is really close to Aiken. You can kind of hedge your bets and find things. University of Florida is in Gainesville, totally horsey area. Alachua, which is just west of Gainesville, is totally exploded because Ocala has exploded and it's spilling everywhere. So there's just a lot of different options that way too. Or go to school, and if you want to still ride, find a local barn and take lessons. So there's so much now, it's almost kind of overwhelming. But finding a good fit, finding something that, like, your philosophies of how things should be, you can learn a lot. I will say, like, the teams, what makes the teams really neat is riding is such an individualized sport. Generally, it's you and your horse. The teams, it is really cool to see. Those kids did everything together. So just to see the camaraderie and to see them support each other, it's a really cool experience that a lot of times riding horses doesn't offer, like rooting for each other, and it's cool. I don't know. Any questions? Yes.
Sorry. Okay. Hi. I actually
Hi.
have two questions.
Okay.
My first question, well, my first one is, can you repeat what you were saying about the medications, like the tranquilizers and things like that? Because you were breaking up, and that was something I
Oh,
wanted to hear, what you were
okay.
saying about.
Yeah. I feel very strongly that they should never be used for riding. But I know, having been exposed to a lot of different schools, like through competing, and a lot of different coaches and just students talking to me about stuff, it is a thing. Like, unfortunately, just like, I mean, I'm still an eventer at heart. So, but it's definitely a thing that, like, my daughters are 16 and 18. I would be asking if either one of them were going to school to ride, it would be a question I would ask point blank. Like, do you tranquilize the horses before you put a rider on? And if they said yes, my answer is thank you very much. See you later. It's for me, it's not okay. I just can't imagine, like, putting my child in that situation. I would never get on a horse that was tranquilized. So, but it is, unfortunately, I know it's done.
Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering, because I didn't know if that, like, if I just, being naive, would think that schools had a regulation against that.
That
But
is exactly what I thought before. So I went into this in 2010, and I thought it would be like everything would be like tidy and buttoned up and done the way it should be done. And I found that that wasn't always the case. The care of the horses too was a thing that it dig deep, because if that matters to you, which clearly it does, like, those are the things you want to make sure those horses are being cared for, because I can't stand going into a barn that, I mean, I quit a job because I was like, I don't, the horses need more than one bucket of water every 24 hours. Like, come on now. So yeah, like, but asking those questions, and you can ask that question and they can skirt it, but I think you can get a feel for it. And then also, if you have the opportunity, talk to students and just casually be like, hey, like, not like it's a bad thing, but
yeah,
because they will tell you.
right.
I had absolutely, I mean, I still am really close to most all of the students I had. I had just incredible, they're just incredible humans. So they'll tell
Okay.
you.
All right. So my
What was
other
the
question,
yeah.
I'm sorry, at the very beginning of your presentation, you were talking about the school programs. I don't know if you're talking about the programs or the teams being competitive. Which one? Were you talking about the teams or the programs?
The teams. I mean,
Okay.
generally,
So
it depends on the college. Some,
yeah.
if you want to
So
go to Vanderbilt or Dartmouth, they both have riding teams. You have to get into Vanderbilt or go to Dartmouth. But yeah, some of the teams are more competitive, and like a competitive, um, like just kind of a like, you're here to win thing versus we're here to have fun thing.
I
And
guess
some of
my
them, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I guess my question actually is, I was just wondering about, like, so the skill that, like, my writer would have before she would get there, like, if, how high up, how competitive,
Okay,
should she be to feel comfortable to, be going,
trying
I mean,
out.
not, obviously not like top tier, but, a
Yeah.
confident writer, like how, like what level?
Well, it depends because they have different levels. So like IDA starts out, they do the green as grat. Are you a dressage rider, an eventer, or what do you do?
Hunters, equitation.
Okay. Okay. So like if you were looking at IHSA, um, that's the Intercollegiate Horse Show Association. They have everything from walk trot up to advanced. So if you don't have a lot of experience showing, it's your experience showing that's going to dictate your level, not how good of a rider you are. So if you're a good rider, like a pretty strong rider, and you don't have like tons of A circuit showing experience, you might end up being like a walk trot canter rider. So it's, if you go on their site, they kind of outline where the cutoff is. So I had, you know, we always at SCAD, we always had a hard time finding the walk trot riders because SCAD just draws the kind of upper level riders, like the jumper riders, that. So it was harder to fill the gap for the walk trot and the walk trot canter riders. So like if we could find somebody that didn't have a lot of show experience, we're gonna build them. Like,
Okay.
so there's, and it depends though, like school like Lake Erie, they don't have a lot of the other end. They have a lot more people trying to be, you know, on the team for walk trot riders and stuff like that. They don't have a lot at the top end. So it just kind of depends on the school. It also just depends a little bit probably on, you know, where they are as far as depth in their team. If you, what year are you?
I'm a sophomore.
Okay. All right. Yeah, so I mean you've got time, but like are you looking in the
Yeah, we're not sure yet, you know, but like I was just wondering about if the like the A shows or the B shows had an impact on, you know, going to the college team. So that helps knowing that.
Yeah,
that, you
it's
know.
not, yeah, it's not so much. And I would say like if you kind of narrow down, like I'm really interested in these three schools, reach out to the coach now, because that's what I would always tell people at any of the, you know, any of the recruitment, any of those days, reach out to the coach at those schools and say, hey, I'm a sophomore, I'm interested in this, this is what I'm doing now. And they'll kind of walk you through it. Like, you know, here's where our strengths are, or here's where, you know, what you might aim for. Some of them might say, oh, get out and show as much as you can because they need those higher level riders. And some of them might be like, you know, it also is like hours of lessons too, but it's like some magic formula. So,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Carrie, I know you have a question. She's not talking. She's gone
Carrie?
away.
Yeah, she's gone away.
She's gone away, Molly.
Yeah, yeah. I don't have any questions, but I thought this was really, really good in terms of questions you need to ask, because those are the things that when you're, you know, when you haven't done a, you know, a riding career, or you don't know a lot of people that have, those are questions you really need to find out so that you're not, you don't get there and find out that you can't live with the, you can't live with the way the horses are cared for, because you're not going to be able to change that. Okay.
Right. And that's, I mean, that's the unfortunate truth of it. And like, you know, like you said, you expect there to be regulations and you expect them to do everything by the book.
Right, right.
But it's not always the case. So
Right.
like
And
being a
some
little
people's
bit,
books are different than others. Okay. In other
right.
words, you know,
Yeah, have
like,
it be by your book, like whatever
yeah,
that
right.
is, you know,
Like
but
the horse care, for instance, is to me is critically important in this
yeah,
whole process, because
yeah,
if you if they don't do a good job of making sure that the horses stay sound, and that they, you know, that they're not all 22 years old, you know, that kind of thing,
Yeah.
That question that you asked about the age of the horses, how many are in the herd, those are huge questions that you might not
Yeah.
even think of.
Yeah.
Okay.
And a lot of times, I mean, the director of riding at SCAD he's been around a long time. Um, but he was always willing to take older horses than the other schools that I was pretty familiar with. Um, so a little bit too, it's, I mean, we had a pretty old herd, but they were pretty sound. I mean, they were taken care of. So
Yeah. Well, it's a
um
combination of the two. It really is a combination.
it is, but the thing I guess that bothered me the most was like some of the stories I heard about where these horses end up, like, you know, barbed wire 100-acre pasture, like when they were no longer serviceable. So um that's a really tough one. Like the responsible schools send them, if they can't home them with a student, they'll send them to they'll pay a retirement farm to care for them for the rest of their lives. So
Yeah. Yeah.
again, that goes back to the endowment. Like if they don't have the money to do it right, then there are going to be cuts, and those cuts you might not be okay with. So
Yeah. Yeah. I once, my daughter went to the Naval Academy and spent a semester at West Point and rode
oh
on
wow.
their equestrian team. And I donated a horse, okay, which
Mhm.
about, and but the deal I donated them with is if they were ever going to put her, put her out to pasture or put her to auction, because a lot of the schools put their horses to auction, okay.
Mhm.
And so they called me and said, well, she's going to auction. I said, no, she's not.
Yeah.
We made this agreement, but there are not a lot of owners that'll do that, you know.
Right. Right.
So um so you just need to know what the long term is for the horses as well,
Yeah.
so
I
that
mean,
you can feel comfortable.
right. Because you don't, I mean, if you're in it for the horses, you don't want to, like I think some people can maybe turn a blind eye to it. I'm not one of those people. So
Me
uh
either.
yeah, it's what you can,
Yeah,
best case scenario is find one that checks all the boxes.
yeah,
So
yeah,
and there are
yeah.
some, I mean, there are a lot of really good schools that do a good job. So it's just making sure you,
I'd highly recommend that you visit the schools you're thinking about also, so you can actually see for yourself what the
yes,
care looks like and what the horses look like,
yeah.
you know.
And like,
And
when I interviewed, I walked through the barn and looked at the horses because I had seen, so same thing. I mean, if they aren't letting you go in the barns, like our tours, our recruiting tours and stuff, our SCAD days, I mean, we took them everywhere. We got to see everything. But yeah, there are a lot of things you want to definitely.
yeah, and there's some
um,
interesting schools that have equestrian programs, although they're not degrees. Like Cornell has an equestrian team. Uh,
yes,
and it's not the same as, for instance, the ones you've been talking about, because those are degrees as well. Okay.
right.
But there are options in terms of being able to ride on a team
Yeah,
and to be at a regular university sort of thing. I don't know how
yeah,
many of those programs there are, but
yeah. There are a lot. I mean, a lot of the NCEA schools are bigger schools. I mean, it's uh, Auburn University, Dartmouth,
yeah,
a lot of Vanderbilt doesn't have a degree. A lot of those schools don't have a degree, but do have teams.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and the thing I was going to say too, which I did, which now I'm just going on, but um, like the students, it is what they make of it. Like as far as what they're going to get out of the 4 years and everything, the students that were really involved and took as much as they could, they're doing a good job. Like, you know, they're in their careers, they're doing what they want to be doing. So it is it's cool. But a lot of times I would get, well, what's the backup plan? I always encouraged students to double major or a minor. Which was like my parents in my head chirping, saying, what's your backup plan? And I'm not sure that telling them to have a backup plan is always a good thing, because then basically you're telling them that their original plan might not be good enough. But I think having a business background, if you're interested in equestrian studies, having a business major also is really important just for the industry. So. All right, Molly and I could go on, but
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know a lot about the specific programs, but I do know a little bit about, I had a daughter who went through that whole process. So
yeah,
and she ended up going to a school that didn't even have a riding program, the Naval Academy. So she hasn't been riding since then, unfortunately, because she was a search and rescue helicopter pilot.
oh wow.
So yeah. So anyway, are there any other questions from anyone? Kelly, this was a wonderful presentation, and we really thank you for doing it. And I think there'll be a lot of people who want to be looking at this over the next couple of years as they get ready for, for the college experience. So thank you again.
Great, thank you.
I'm going to stop the recording. And if you guys want to do any chatting afterwards, that's fine. But I'm going to stop the recording at this point.
Okay.
So thank you so much. And thank you, Carrie, for facilitating this. Anyway, so